What's up, buddies and buddy girls? Buddy. Welcome back to Facts Friday. Today, I am going to be talking about Isaac Newton. In my opinion, one of the greatest minds to have ever lived. But before I get started on that, if any of you are new and you've never seen a video I've made before, I suggest you check out my channel if you enjoy science or history type videos, facts, whatever. I have a whole bunch so far on those subjects, and also if you enjoy science fiction novels or movies or whatever, I just recently started reading a new science fiction book, and I read chapter 1 Wednesday, and I made a video. It is about 40 minutes long, and I would recommend checking that out if you are interested in that type of thing. It's a new book to me. I'm reading. I haven't read any further than chapter 1. I just read chapter 1 with you guys, so I have no idea what happens in the book. It got a lot of good reviews on multiple sites, and it seemed pretty interesting as I was reading it, so I'm definitely going to continue to read it. If I see that more people are viewing it and watching it and liking it, then I will continue to read it and make videos. If not, then I'm just going to read it on my own, and I'll think of other videos to make. So I'll probably make like 2 more and see how they go. If people watch them, then I'll make them. I've had a couple people say that they would like to get more of that type of video. They'd like me to make more, so I'm gonna at least make 2 more, and hopefully it gets more views. I think I was gonna say something else. I had something else to say. I can't remember. I can't remember. Anyways, the reason I'm doing this Isaac Newton video is because his birth date is January 4th, and since we are only a little past January 4th, I figured it would be a good time to do the video. Besides the fact that I'm really interested in this man, he's just crazy genius. Let's get started. Oh yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this, because I would definitely be interested in making more videos similar to this, like biography style videos on individuals. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this. And also, before I get started, like right now, can someone like put a timestamp in the comments of when I started the actual Woolsthorpe, England. Isaac Newton was an established physicist and mathematician and is credited as one of the great minds of the 17th century scientific revolution. With discoveries in optics, motion, and mathematics, Newton developed the principles of modern physics. In 1687, he published his most acclaimed work, Philosophiae, Naturalis, Principia, Mathematica, or Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, which has been called the single most influential book on physics. Newton died in London on March 31st, 1727. Early life. On January 4th, 1643, Isaac Newton was born in the hamlet of Woolsthorpe, Lincolnshire, England. Using the old Julian calendar, Newton's birth date is sometimes displayed as December 25th, 1642. He was the only son of a prosperous local farmer, also named Isaac Newton, who died 3 months before he was born. A premature baby born, tiny and weak, Newton was not expected to survive. When he was 3 years old, his mother, Hannah Ayscough Newton, remarried a well-to-do minister, Barnabas Smith, and went to live with him, leaving young Newton with his maternal grandmother. The experience left an Sorry, I thought my battery cut out. The experience left an indelible print on Newton, later manifesting itself as an acute sense of insecurity. He anxiously obsessed over his published work, defending its merits with irrational behavior. At age 12, Newton was reunited with his mother after her second husband died. She brought along her 3 small children from her second marriage. Newton had been enrolled at the King's School in Grantham, a town in Lincolnshire, where he lodged with a local apothecary and was introduced to the fascinating world of chemistry. His mother pulled him out of school, for her plan was to make him a farmer and have him tend the farm. Newton failed miserably as he found farming monotonous. He soon was sent back to King's School to finish his basic education. Perhaps sensing the young man's innate intellectual abilities, his uncle, a graduate of the University of Cambridge's Trinity College, persuaded Newton's mother to have him enter the university 17th century was already in full force. The heliocentric view of the universe, theorized by astronomers Nicolaus Copernicus and Johannes Kepler, and later refined by Galileo, was well known in most European academic circles. Philosopher René Descartes had begun to formulate a new concept of nature as an intricate, impersonal, and inert machine. Yet, like most universities in Europe, Cambridge was steeped in Aristotelian philosophy and a view of nature resting on a geocentric view of the universe, dealing with nature in qualitative rather than quantitative terms. I'm not sure if I mispronounced that name or not, so sorry if I did. During his first 3 years at Cambridge, Newton was taught the standard curriculum, but was fascinated with the more advanced science. All his spare time was spent reading from the modern philosophers. The result was a less than stellar performance, but one that is understandable given his dual course of study. It was during this time that Newton kept a second set of notes entitled Certain Philosophical Questions. The questions reveal that Newton had discovered the new concept of nature that provided the framework for the scientific revolution. Though Newton graduated with no honors or distinctions, his efforts won him the title of scholar and 4 years of financial support for future education. Unfortunately, in 1665, the Great Plague that was ravaging Europe had come to Cambridge, forcing the university to close. Newton returned home to pursue his private study. It was during this 18-month hiatus that he conceived the method of infinitesimal calculus, set the foundations for his theory of light and color, and gained significant insight into the laws of planetary motion. Insights that eventually led to the publication of his Principia in 1687. Legend has it that at this time Newton experienced his famous inspiration of gravity with the falling apple. So this one always makes me think, did Newton discover calculus, or did he create it? I know a lot of people, I think it's like half and half, but I would say he discovered it more than created it, because isn't it always there? Just somebody has to find it. Like math is always there. You just have to discover how to do it, I guess. But that's just crazy in itself. That he basically, I think it said, he, quote unquote, invented calculus in the time it takes the average student to learn. outbreak subsided in 1667, Newton returned to Cambridge and was elected a minor fellow at Trinity College, as he was still not considered a standout scholar. However, in the ensuing years, his fortune improved. Newton received his Master's of Arts degree in 1669, before he was 27. During this time, he came across Nicholas Mercator's published book on methods of dealing with infinite series. Newton quickly wrote a treatise, De Analysi, expounding his own wider-ranging results. He shared this with friend and mentor Isaac Barrow, but didn't include his name as author. In June 1669, Barrow shared the unaccredited manuscript with British mathematician John Collins. In August 1669, Barrow identified its author to Collins as Mr. Newton, very young, but of an extraordinary genius and proficiency in these things. Newton's work was brought to the attention of the mathematics community for the first time. Shortly afterward, Barrow resigned his Lucasian professorship at Cambridge, and Newton assumed the chair. Professional life. As a professor, Newton was exempted from tutoring, but required to deliver an annual course of lectures. He chose to deliver his work on optics as his initial topic. Part of Newton's study of optics was aided with the use of a reflecting telescope that he designed and constructed in 1668. His first major public scientific achievement. This invention helped prove his theory of light and color. The Royal Society asked for a demonstration of his reflecting telescope in 1671, and the organization's interest encouraged Newton to publish his notes on light, optics, and color in 1672. These notes were later published as part of Newton's Optics, or treatise of the reflections, refractions, inflections, and colors of light. However, not everyone at the Royal Academy was enthusiastic about Newton's discoveries in optics. Among the dissenters was Robert Hooke, one of the original members of the Royal Academy and a scientist who was accomplished in a number of areas, including mechanics and optics. In his paper, Newton theorized that white light was a composite of all colors of the spectrum, and that light was composed of particles. Hooke believed that light was composed of waves. Hooke quickly condemned Newton's paper in condescending terms and attacked Newton's methodology and conclusions. Hooke was not the only one to question Newton's work in optics. Renowned Dutch scientist Christian Huygens and a number of French Jesuits also raised objections, but because of Hooke's association with the Royal Society and his own work in optics, his criticism stung Newton the worst. Unable to handle the critic, skepticism that was to continue throughout his life. Newton denied Hooke's charge that his theories had any shortcomings and argued the importance of his discoveries to all of science. In the ensuing months, the exchange between the two men grew more acrimonious, and soon Newton threatened to quit the society altogether. He remained only when several other members assured him that the fellows held him in high esteem. However, the rivalry between Newton and Hooke would continue for several years thereafter. Then, in 1678, Newton suffered a complete nervous breakdown, and the correspondence abruptly ended. The death of his mother the following year caused him to become even more isolated, and for 6 years he withdrew from intellectual exchange except when others initiated correspondence, which he always kept short. During his hiatus from public life, Newton returned to his study of gravitation and its effects on the orbits of planets. Ironically, the impetus that put Newton on the right direction in the study came from Robert Hooke. In a 1679 letter of general correspondence to Royal Society members for contributions, Hooke wrote to Newton and brought up the question of planetary motion, suggesting that a formula involving the inverse squares might explain the attraction between planets and the shape of their orbits. Subsequent exchanges transpired before Newton quickly broke off the correspondence once again, but Hooke's idea was soon incorporated into Newton's work on planetary motion, and from his notes it appears he had quickly drawn his own conclusions by 1680. Though he kept his discoveries to himself, in early 1684, in a conversation with fellow Royal Society members Christopher Wren and Edmund Halley, Hooke made his case on the proof for planetary motion. Both Wren and Halley thought he was on something, but pointed out that a mathematical demonstration was needed. In August 1684, Halley traveled to Cambridge to visit with Newton, who was coming out of his seclusion. Halley idly asked him what shape the orbit of a planet would take if its attraction to the sun followed the inverse square of the distance between them. Hooke's theory. Newton knew the answer due to his concentrated work for the past 6 years and replied, in ellipse. Newton claimed to have solved the problem some 18 years prior during his hiatus from Cambridge and the plague, but he was unable to find his notes. Halley persuaded him to work out the problem mathematically and offered to pay all costs so that the ideas might be published. Publishing Principia. In 1687, after 18 months of intense and effectively non-stop work, Newton published Philosophiae, Naturalis, Principia, Mathematica, said to be the single most influential book on physics and possibly all of science. It is most often known as Principia and contains information on nearly all of the essential concepts of physics, except energy. The work offers an exact quantitative description of bodies in motion in three basic laws. 1. A stationary body will stay stationary unless an external force is applied to it. 2. Force is equal to mass times acceleration, and a change in motion is proportional to the force applied. And 3. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. These three laws helped explain not only elliptical planetary orbits, but nearly every other motion in the universe. All the planets are kept in orbit by the pull of the sun's gravity. How the moon revolves around Earth, and the moons of Jupiter revolve around it, and how comets revolve in elliptical orbits around the sun. The laws also allowed Newton to calculate the mass of each planet, calculate the flattening of the Earth at the poles, and the bulge at the equator, and how the gravitational pull of the sun and moon create the Earth's tides. In Newton's account, gravity kept the universe balanced, made it work, and brought heaven and earth together in one great equation. Upon the publication of the first edition of Principia, Robert Hooke immediately accused Newton of plagiarism, claiming that he had discovered the theory of inverse squares and that Newton had stolen his work. The charge was unfounded, as most scientists knew, for Hooke had only theorized on the idea and had never brought it to any level of proof. However, Newton was furious and strongly defended his discoveries. He withdrew all references to Hooke in his notes and threatened to withdraw from publishing the subsequent edition of Principia altogether. Halley, who had invested much of himself in Newton's work, tried to make peace between the two men, while Newton begrudgingly agreed to insert a joint acknowledgement of Hooke's work shared with Wren and Halley. In his discussion of the law of inverse squares, it did nothing to placate Hooke. As the years went on, Hooke's life began to unravel. His beloved niece and companion died the same year that Principia was published. In 1687, as Newton's reputation and fame grew, Hooke's declined, causing him to become even more bitter and loathsome toward his rival. To the bitter end, Hooke took every opportunity he could to offend Newton. Knowing that his rival would soon be elected president of the Royal Society, Hooke refused to retire until the year of his death in 1703. International prominence. Principia immediately raised Newton to international prominence, and he thereafter became more involved in public affairs. Consciously or unconsciously, he was ready for a new direction in life. He no longer found contentment in his position at Cambridge, and he was becoming more involved in other issues. He helped lead the resistance to King James II attempts to reinstitute Catholic teaching at Cambridge. And in 1689 he was elected to represent Cambridge in Parliament. While in London, Newton acquainted himself with a broader group of intellectuals and became acquainted with political philosopher John Locke, though many of the scientists on the continent continued to teach the mechanical world according to Aristotle. A young generation of British scientists became captivated with Newton's new view of the physical world and recognized him as their leader. One of these admirers was Nicolas Foucault de Dollier, a Swiss mathematician whom Newton befriended while in London. Dollier, not sure. Sorry if I mispronounced that. However, within a few years, Newton fell into another nervous breakdown. In 1693, the cause is open to speculation. His disappointment over not being appointed to a higher position by England's new monarchs, William III and Mary II, or the subsequent loss of his friendship with Dollier, exhaustion from being overworked, or perhaps chronic mercury poisoning after decades of alchemical research. It's difficult to know the exact cause. But evidence suggests that letters written by Newton to several of his London acquaintances and friends, including Dollier, seemed deranged and paranoid, and accused them of betrayal and conspiracy. Oddly enough, Newton recovered quickly, wrote letters of apology to friends, and was back to work within a few months. He emerged with all his intellectual faculties intact, but seemed to have lost interest in scientific problems and now favored pursuing prophecy and scripture in the study of alchemy. While some might see this as work beneath the man who had revolutionized science, it might be more properly attributed to Newton responding to the issues of the time in turbulent 17th century Britain. Many intellectuals were grappling with the meaning of many different subjects, not least of which were religion, politics, and the very purpose of life. Modern science was still so new that no one knew for sure how it measured up against older philosophies. In 1696, Newton was able to attain the governmental position he had long sought, Warden of the Mint. After acquiring his new title, he permanently moved to London and lived with his niece, Catherine Barton. She was the mistress of Lord Halifax, a high-ranking government official who was instrumental in having Newton promoted. In 1699, the Master of the Mint, a position that he would hold until his death, not wanting it to be considered a mere honorary position, Newton approached the job in earnest, reforming the currency and severely punishing counterfeiters. As Master of the Mint, Newton moved the British currency, the pound sterling, from the silver to the gold standard. In 1703, Newton was elected president of the Royal Society upon Robert Hooke's death. In 1705, he was knighted by Queen Anne of England. By this point in his life, Newton's career in science and discovery had given way to a career of political power and influence. never seemed to understand the notion of science as a cooperative venture, and his ambition and fierce defense of his own discoveries continued to lead him from one conflict to another with other scientists. By most accounts, Newton's tenure at the society was tyrannical and autocratic. He was able to control the lives and careers of younger scientists with absolute power. In 1705, in a controversy that had been brewing for several years, German mathematician Gottfried Leibniz publicly accused Newton of plagiarizing his research, claiming he had discovered infinitesimal calculus several years before the publication of Principia. In 1712, the Royal Society appointed a committee to investigate the matter, of course. Since Newton was president of the society, he was able to appoint the committee's members and oversee its investigation. Not surprisingly, the committee concluded Newton's priority over the discovery. That same year, in another of Newton's more flagrant episodes of tyranny, he published without permission the notes of astronomer John Flamsteed. It seems the astronomer had collected a massive body of data from his years at the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, England. Newton had requested a large volume of Flamsteed's notes for his revisions to Principia. Annoyed when Flamsteed wouldn't provide him with more information as quickly as he wanted it, Newton used his influence as president of the Royal Society to be named the chairman of the body of visitors responsible for the Royal Observatory. He then tried to force the immediate publication of Flamsteed's catalogue of the stars, as well as all of Flamsteed's notes, edited and unedited, to add insult to injury. Newton arranged for Flamsteed's mortal enemy Edmund Halley to prepare the notes for press. Flamsteed was finally able to get a court order forcing Newton to cease his plans for publication and return the notes, one of the few times that Newton was bested by one of his rivals. The final years. Toward the end of his life, Newton lived at Cranberry Park, near Winchester, England, with his niece Catherine Barton, Conduit, and her husband, John Conduit. By this time, Newton had become one of the most famous men in Europe. His scientific discoveries were unchallenged. He also had bestowing sizable gifts to charity. Despite his fame, Newton's life was far from perfect. He never married or made many friends, and in his later years, a combination of pride, insecurity, and side trips on peculiar scientific inquiries led even some of his few friends to worry about his mental stability. By the time he reached 80 years of age, Newton was experiencing digestion problems and had to drastically change his diet and mobility. Then, in March 1727, Newton experienced severe pain in his abdomen and blacked out, never to regain consciousness. He died the next day on March 31st, 1727, at the age of 84. Isaac Newton's fame grew even more after his death, as many of his contemporaries proclaimed him the greatest genius who ever lived. Maybe a slight exaggeration, but his discoveries had a large impact on Western thought, leading to comparisons to the likes of Plato, Aristotle, and Galileo. Although his discoveries were among many made during the scientific revolution, Isaac Newton's universal principles of gravity found no parallels in science at the time. Of course, Newton was proven wrong on some of his key assumptions. In the 20th century, Albert Einstein would overturn Newton's concept of the universe, stating that space, distance, and motion were not absolute but relative, and that the universe was more fantastic than Newton had ever conceived. Newton might not have been surprised. In his later life, when asked for an assessment of his achievements, he replied, "I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself now and then in finding a smoother pebble or prettier shell than ordinary, while the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me." And that is all I have for today. I wonder if anybody is still listening right now. If you are still listening up to this point and didn't fall asleep or click away from the video, let me know. Why don't you type like I'm trying to think of a word that I'll remember. Because I don't want someone to type this like 3 weeks from now and then I'll be like, what the hell are they talking about? That makes no sense. Only the true fans are still listening right now, with me debating over what word you should write. Okay, let's pick out something. I'm just gonna look at something in my room. Okay, type. I'm gonna pick one of my colognes, so type first instinct. Type first instinct. If you type first instinct, I'll know that you were listening all the way until the end of the video. And people who didn't listen to the whole video will be really confused why you're typing that. Anyways, I will see you soon. Oh yeah, another thing I'm gonna add in, this is for probably like the true fans, because this is probably, I think this is at least 40 minutes long, I'm not sure. If I don't respond as much in the comments, it's because like if people say great video or whatever, I don't think I'm gonna respond as much, just because I don't have tons of time. It's taking up a lot of my time just creating these videos, and obviously I appreciate that, and I still read all the comments. I just might not comment as much. It just feels redundant to keep saying thank you over and over and over, because there's only so many ways to say, thank you and stuff like that. So, if I had more time, I probably wouldn't mind as much, but since I don't have as much time, I don't want it to feel, I don't want it to have a negative, I don't want it to be a negative for me to feel like, oh, I gotta respond. Just know that I'm reading all your comments and I appreciate all of it. I'll probably respond more towards comments that are more unique and stuff like that. Anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there so people who listen to this whole thing will know. If they don't see me responding as much, that is why. Okay, that's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you again